Welcome to the Carl Jackson Show podcast, your daily dose of objective truth in a world of confusion and lies. We got a lot that I want to talk to you about today. The NDAA was passed by Congress. I want to get into that. I'll give you some updates on what's happening in the Middle East with Israel and Hamas. Steve Baker, he works for The Blaze. He's an investigative journalist there. Yesterday, he put out on X that he's going to be arrested. The FBI informed him. And I got to talk to you about that because this is still scary. They're still rounding up people. This was a guy that was just reporting on J6. So we're gonna talk about that as well. Biden's approval ratings have dipped like nobody's business. But again, I would warn you that the Democrat Party works based upon a system, not necessarily a candidate. However, if enough people in the middle grow tired, I'm talking about the independents, grow tired of this man, then Republicans may be able to pull off a victory in 2024. But we still have to get out on that. I've got that, and I've got more. Vladimir Putin states that he would like to find a solution and send Americans Evan Gershkovich and Paul Whelan back home. This is it's insane. Plus, we have in the Middle East, our soldiers have been attacked 100 times. 100 times since October 7th. We've not done anything about it. Obviously, I don't want our hands everywhere, right? I mean, we're in Ukraine. Biden is at the helm. God forbid we go to World War III with this guy in office. But we also can't sit here and let our soldiers be attacked. And I'm fearful that the weakness that's being displayed by this administration is going to cause a major conflict. So we're going to be talking about that and more. That's kind of a long intro. Hey, all right, guys. So again, I appreciate you tuning in. Please subscribe to the podcast wherever you go to get your podcast. The Carl Jackson Show is where you can find us. Please subscribe to our YouTube page. Please subscribe to our Rumble page. Tucker Carlson, that's news. Tucker Carlson, and I said this all along. Once he left Fox, I thought Rumble would be the place that he would ultimately need to go. He just made that move with his network. So great move by Tucker Carlson, in my opinion, where he doesn't have to worry about being censored, over there. So great news for him. All things social media, you can find me at The Carl Jackson Show. Wherever I am on social media. Don't forget, mypillow.com has some wonderful Christmas deals available for you. And right now, I don't have the ad right in front of my face, but I can tell you that if you go to mypillow.com and you click on that radio podcast square and you enter my name, Carl, there's going to be a bunch of deals that are available for you. You have Giza Dream Sheets that are marked down to seriously low prices, towels, robes, mattress toppers, you name it, even dog beds and slippers for your feet. You name it, mypillow.com. Promo code Carl is where you can go. Okay, and also, guys, yesterday I told you that Hunter Biden, I thought, escaped, if you will, a level of prosecution because he gave his little press conference. He gave his press conference before there was a formal impeachment inquiry, formalized, if you will, in the House. I may have been wrong about that. Jonathan Turley came out and wrote a piece, as well as you have a gentleman, I forget his name, Saul, an attorney by the name of Saul, I forget his last name. He came on, we've got the video for you, but he came on Laura Ingram's program last night and said, KGP, Cringe Jean-Pierre, may have just tossed, if you will, those are my words, an obstruction charge onto the president. So here I am looking at this spoiled brat giving a press conference yesterday and thinking he found a way to skirt the law. Au contraire. He may have just stepped in it and further incriminated his father. But this is what you have when you're dealing with a crackhead. All right. Gabe, that would be my advice to you. Never, ever, ever trust a crackhead. All right. Now, So let's go ahead and get into this. First off, I want to play this video for you. This was on CNN, and then I'll go over some of the news stories, and then I'm going to delve further into what's related to this video, which is the Hunter Biden story. And this is a column from Jonathan Turley himself that was written on the Messenger. Hunter Biden's contempt of Congress has wider consequences. So I want to dive into that. But before we do, let's roll this video, por favor. Gabe, this is on CNN. This is the Biden White House attempting to spin what happened with Hunter Biden, and it doesn't go well for this gentleman with CNN, of all places. It's almost like we're coming into an election cycle, and they have to pretend as if they are, worthy and honest journalists. So here we go. Let's roll the tape, por favor, Gabe.
In the statement that Hunter Biden made yesterday, he said, "Let me say it as clearly as I can. My father was not financially involved in my business." He was unequivocal about that. But that is an evolution of where the president had been during the campaign, where the White House had been at the start of the administration. Not involved financially in the business is very different than never talked about the business, not been involved in the business at all. Was that an intentional point of clarity, do you think?
I actually dispute the whole premise of that question.
Why?
It's one of Jim Jordan's favorite little shiny objects, is to try to take a semantic thing and make an argument that is somehow far afield from what they're actually focused on. We've been extremely clear over and over again for years, and nothing has changed. The president was not in business with his son, period. They're trying to make up all sorts of allegations and make up lies.
With respect, I'm not
about
citing
him
Jim
doing
Jordan
things that
here.
were
I
wrong
was
and
in some of the White House press briefings where it was said explicitly the president did not talk to his son about business dealing. That is very clearly not the case, and I think the statement from the White House has changed, and I think been a little bit more precise over the course of the last several months. It's what the president said on the campaign trail as well. I'm not saying this is like an impeachable offense or some grand indictment, but it is a fact that the president said one thing that ended up being not true.
Again, I dispute that's true. That is not true. The truth is that he wasn't in business with his son. The Republicans have been for years trying to make arguments.
Again, I'm not saying that he was in business with his son.
And over and over again, those have been refuted.
Okay, let me tell you where this guy and the Biden administration has they're starting to make a tactical mistake here. When CNN is calling you out, you're making a tactical mistake. Now, I said, this is CNN. They've got to pretend like they're real journalists. But this guy was essentially saying, listen, I'm on your team, but I'm telling you this. I think this is kind of a a warning shot, and it's something that you cannot do. You need the press on your side, at least the Biden administration does, going into 2024, whether Biden will be the nominee or not. The left needs the press on their side. So one thing that you want to do, that's a tactic that you would use with the opposition party. You would say, well, I reject the premise of your question, and you may honestly reject the premise of your question, but this is a guy, he goes after the CNN reporter essentially and says, hey, this is a Jim Jordan talking point, insulting him. This is a guy that is, in my opinion, I'm almost 1,000% sure that this guy is, you know what I'm saying? He's a Democrat. He's been in those press briefings. You don't make him look like a fool on national TV. You don't do it. And so this guy says, wait a minute, I'm not saying this is an impeachable offense, this is so on, etc. In my opinion, that was a tactical mistake on the part of the Biden administration, this spokesman for the Biden administration. I don't know how he should have answered. Quite frankly, I think Joe Biden is stepping in it. Hunter Biden is stepping in it. It's obvious that the Democrat Party wants them out. And speaking of that, let me just go over some of this news. And what I'll do is I've been inconsistent with Jackson's 5. I'm going to try to just be more consistent with that and bring it back. I've gone back and forth with my mind and that, but I do want to keep you guys up to date on what the latest and breaking news is of the day. But sometimes I just think the news stories have gotten so stupid and so worthless. Some of the headlines, frankly, where they're not going to subtract or add to your life one iota, that I'm like, whatever. But, it is important to be informed. I'm just seeing this. Oh, man, there's more fallout. There's so much more fallout from that creepy Christmas video that the Biden administration, that Joe Biden let out. All right, so pretty astounding. Okay, so here, where is it at? Where is it at? Okay, so here it is. All right, so President Biden's approval ratings reaches a low. All right, this is according to Town Hall and both Pew Research. So just how low can President Joe Biden's job approval rating go? They ask at Town Hall. According to Pew Research's tracking of Americans' approval of the president, the floor has yet to be found, as the latest survey pins approval at just 33%. That's a 5-point slide from the beginning of 2023 and 21 points lower than when he first took office. That leaves nearly 2/3 of Americans, 64%, disapproving of Biden's performance as POTUS. Now, I don't know what to make a lot of these polls, even left leaning type polls, or I just don't know. And frankly, I'm not sure if Pew Research leans left or right. I think they try to be fair, but it's become increasingly difficult to poll people with the advent of cell phones, and it's gotten worse and worse and worse. A lot of people that don't answer polls. So I looked through the polling at Pew. I don't know how many people were questioned. I don't know what age range. I simply don't know. But having said that, the Democrats will see polls, and they live and breathe by polls, right? So and Republicans are starting to do the same. But they see these polls and they're like, oh my God. I noticed that Gavin Newsom, after he got crushed in that debate by DeSantis, it seemed like he disappeared off the scene for a week or two, and then he finally popped up. I'm starting to see more and more appearances of him on video touting his success in California, which is a total joke. So this guy, in my opinion, is staying at the ready in the event that the DNC has to hand over the delegates to Gavin Newsom in the summer of 2024. And remember, they can do just that. But his poll numbers are slipping here. Also, let me share. So that is a concern. So I'm gonna circle back to that video. I do want to share some more information with you real quickly before we dive in for the remainder of the podcast into Hunter Biden's contempt of Congress and how it's going to have wider consequences. So the Congress passed the defense bill worth $886 billion. Guys, the Republican Congress is completely feckless. You had senators that stood up that tried to stop this NDAA. You also not enough House members tried to stop it. I want to give you some numbers to make sure that I'm accurate here, but I do want to share what's not in the NDAA, what was stripped. All right. So just so you know that Republicans don't fight for anything. The left always seem to win. This makes no sense when we control the House. Don't give me this. We only control, 1/3 of the, of the leadership in Washington, D.C. All right. You control the purse. You can do a lot with the power of the purse. And I kid you not, this Republican Party is hell bent on siding with Democrats. They are scared of Democrats. They are scared of Democrats' talking points. They are scared to lose power, which ensures that the country is going to go to hell with gasoline draws on. That is the difference between the left and the right. The left will sacrifice members in order to advance an agenda. Whereas the right, when it comes to the Republican Party, you get, thank God, a Freedom Caucus. You get some conservatives in the Senate that'll stand up, but there's never enough of them to stop the onslaught or the train or the journey to communism. I mean, it's absolutely insane. So here's what they didn't get. I'm sorry, my phone went to sleep on me while I was sitting there blabbing. Crap. Now, I'm sorry. Guys, I apologize. Now I just went to a bunch of... Forgive me. Okay. I'm reloading it here. So here's what they did not get. If I can find it now, I apologize. Notice that I'm talking slowly in order to buy time. So here's what's not in the NDAA, and that's the National Defense Authorization Act. It was stripped from the final bill by House and Senate negotiators. So were a host of deeply, this is from the Washington Examiner, partisan provisions on abortion, transgender care, and DEI. So all of that stuff, DEI, the stuff that's making our military woke. The Democrats won on that. So they'll get to keep that, right? DC, there was a conservative that said compromise in DC always means that Democrats win. I'm paraphrasing, but that's absolutely the case. And listen, I'm glad that our soldiers are going to get some more equipment that they need. They're going to get some pay raises. Civilians in the Department of Defense, they're going to get about, I think, a 5.2% pay raise. That's pretty unheard of. I'm not sure that many of you are getting a 5.2% pay raise, but they just did at the Department of Defense. So they will get that. I do believe that we need to build up our military. I do believe that our military needs to be strong for the next president. I think it's totally feckless and worthless with Biden at the helm right now. Speaking of Biden being at the helm, let me just share this with you real quickly. Hat tip to Breitbart. All right, Iran-backed attacks on the U.S. troops in the Middle East reach nearly 100. Also, this is really great news from Israel and Hamas. Let me see. Where is this? Forgive me. I'm sorry. I'm scrolling through. I had some things open up on my screen, some things that I did not print out. Okay, so Israel says no political calendar to end war for U.S. election. And I'm glad they're taking that stance, because that's exactly what's happening. What the UN is doing, what the United States is doing, sadly, under the leadership of the feckless Joe Biden and all of his weaklings in his administration, what they're doing is essentially telling Israel and telling Netanyahu, listen, for the sake of U.S. elections, we want you to cease firing upon these Hamas terrorists that have killed at least 1,200 Israelis, or maybe 1,400. And listen, no. If I'm Netanyahu, and I'm in Israel, the existential threat that exists, it's either Israel's survival or it's Hamas's survival. All right, we're not dealing with terrorists the same way you would deal with terrorists. Biden and the Democrat Party. I'm sorry, Hamas needs to be taken out, hook, line, and sinker, right from the root. I go all the way up to the leadership. Take them out, every single one of them. Send the message to Iran. Send the message to Lebanon with Hezbollah. We will do you exactly the same way. And thank you. Continue to ignore the United States of America. It's a sad day where you have to say that, but this isn't our war to fight. We're not under an existential threat, except from the left. But militarily, we're not under an existential threat. So I'm so glad that Israel is saying, screw you, UN, screw you, the United States of America. You guys continue to fight for your survival. I will stand with Israel to the extent that I can. All right, so Iran-backed attacks on U.S. troops in Middle East reached nearly 100. So Iran proxy groups' attacks on American troops stationed in Iraq and Syria have reached nearly 100 since the Israel-Hamas war began. All right. This, according to a U.S. military official on Friday. The number of attacks as of Thursday was 97 since October 17th. Have you guys been hearing about this in the news? You guys hear about this at all? Because the left knows that Biden is weak. And remember, what started this serious decline of Biden's poll numbers? It was the Afghanistan surrender, that debacle. Started that's when people finally woke up and were like, oh my God, what did we get ourselves into with this guy? So now you have this again, Iran proxy groups attacking American troops stationed in Iraq and Syria. I bet you there's a bunch of people that don't even know we still have troops there. But 100 times. This is absolutely insane. At least 66 troops have been injured in these attacks, including at least 19 who were diagnosed with traumatic brain injuries. Oh, by the way, where are the rest of the... Have you heard anything about the American hostages in Israel, Gabe? You heard anything about that? Biden administration mentioned that at all? Yeah. I haven't either. But anyway, that's where we are. So I just wanted to bring you up to date on that real quick, too. This gentleman works for the Blaze, a gentleman by the name of Steve Baker. I want to bring you this story. I'm probably going to go into this story more in depth next week. I think it's really crucial here. So Blaze Media investigative journalist Steve Baker says the DOJ will be charging him for his January 6th reporting. Not participation, reporting. Guys, if I don't listen, if you love this country, if you've been speaking out there's no doubt that if 2024, if Democrats still run the show, they're going to be things are going to get scary for people that want to report the truth. Oh, by the way, one of the things that I forgot to mention in the NDAA, you know what? The Republicans failed to secure as well. Surveillance, the National Surveillance Act, and the NSA. They get to continue. We get to continue to pay for, or surveillance or spying on American citizens. No thanks to the Republicans. I think they needed 41 senators. If I recall correctly, I think Senator Rand Paul said, I think they needed 41 senators. I may be off by a number or two, one or two, in order to stop the Surveillance Act from continuing in the NDAA. They didn't get to those numbers. I think only 35 Republicans or so voted to discontinue the surveillance of American citizens. This is where we're at. This is where we're at. So then you have this story with this guy, Steve Baker. And here it is. Again, Blaze Media investigative journalist Steve Baker says Justice Department will be charging him for his January 6th reporting. So Blaze Media investigative journalist Steve Baker on Thursday said the U.S. Department of Justice will be charging him for his January 6th reporting. He says, and I quote, "My attorney has just been notified by the FBI that I'm going to be charged by the Justice Department for my journalistic efforts on January 6th. He says, I have to self-surrender on Tuesday. Charges are yet unknown. Stay tuned for more information to follow this afternoon," close quote. Baker on Thursday told the Blaze Media that FBI Special Agent Craig Noyes, Noyes, contacted his attorney in North Carolina, and that Noyes said he doesn't know what the charges are and won't know until the judge signs off on the warrant. Really? Baker also told the Blaze Media that if the DOJ goes forward with charges, travel restrictions will be placed on him. That'll hamper his reporting. How convenient, as he's based in North Carolina, but works a great deal in D.C., covering trials, viewing J6 videos that have been released, and speaking face-to-face with elected officials. Given Baker has been writing Blaze Media investigative stories on J6 since early October, Baker said, quote, he cannot help but think the timing of the impeding charges is suspect. Blaze Media's editor-in-chief Matthew Peterson spoke out Thursday regarding the message. Here's what he had to say on X. "This is outrageous retaliation on the part of the federal government against a journalist." And he says Steve Baker was an independent journalist on J6. He's now investigating the events on that day for the Blaze. We must all rally to end this totalitarian madness. And he is absolutely correct on that. So here's a guy that will probably be arrested, that is going to be arrested by the FBI for reporting on J6. Baker discussed his J6 legal saga in a pair of October commentary pieces for the Blaze. And then Baker said he'd been under federal investigation for the better part of 2 years following his independent journalistic work on J6, which began before he joined Blaze Media. Here's more from Baker. He says, "I made no effort to hide what I was doing on J6. I did 2 different interviews that same day with WUSA, a CBS News affiliate in Washington, D.C. I also uploaded a short YouTube video commentary later that evening. Upon returning to my home in Raleigh, North Carolina, I socked myself away for 5 days doing a frame-by-frame analysis of my own videos. I then wrote and published on January 13, 2021, a 9,500-word opus to my blog detailing what I experienced that day, titled What I Saw on January 6th in Washington, D.C. That piece and a February 24, 2021 follow-up, Who Was Up the Chain on January 6th, has been viewed and read by hundreds of thousands of readers on my blog and various social media pages. He says, I always expected that I would be contacted by the FBI at some point, at the very least to acquire my videos for the Bureau's investigations. I did no violence or property destruction on January 6th, he says, and I certainly did not interfere with the election certification, as I didn't enter the Capitol building until well after both the Senate and the House of Representatives had already been evacuated. So they're going after journalists now. If you report on J6, the left cannot use this, lose the narrative, the insurrection narrative, right? That's one of the things that they're banking on to be able to win in 2024. They cannot afford to lose that. So I just wanted to share that piece of information with you. And another piece of news real quick before I move on and finish up with this Hunter Biden story. And again, please subscribe subscribe to my podcast wherever you go to get your podcast. Guys, we'd love to see more of you on YouTube and Rumble. We really would love our numbers to be bolstered there. So we certainly appreciate that. Oh, here's some good news. Oklahoma eliminates the DEI practices in the state. So that's good news. We need some encouragement like that after learning that Harvard is going to keep their plagiarists as president. And that lady ripped off half of her papers from other people. She plagiarized. I think she's only written 10 papers for her, for higher education or whatever. After her bachelor's, half of them were ripped off. Half of them were plagiarized. You plagiarize a sentence normally, you're getting kicked out. This chick plagiarized five papers. Unbelievable. Vladimir Putin states he would like to, quote, find a solution, send Americans Evan Gershkovich and Paul Whelan back home. Russian President Vladimir Putin said Moscow was in talks with the U.S. over detained Americans Evan Gershkovich. I think he was a Washington Times reporter, I believe. And Paul Whelan. Paul Whelan has been in prison for quite some time. Remember, we negotiated the WNBA basketball player for the Merchant of Death. We brought her home and we released a killer, terrorist in exchange. Oh, man. In his end-of-year news conference on Thursday, Putin said he hoped to, quote, find a solution, even though, quote, it's not easy, close quote. His comments come after the U.S. Senate Department said last week that Russia had recently rejected a, quote, new and significant, close quote, proposal for the release of the two Americans. On Thursday, State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller told reporters that Washington has, quote, put multiple offers on the table, close quote. Putin's event Thursday was his first year-end news conference since Russia invaded Ukraine. And in 2022, the country's longtime leader recently announced he would be running for another 6-year term as president in Russia's upcoming March election. And I'm gonna take a stab, guess, make a prediction that he's gonna win that election in a landslide. But anyway, that's interesting news from Putin. Again, he says he would like to find a solution, send Americans Evan Gershkovich and Paul Whelan back home. All right, so now that's that. All right, so lots of news. Now let's wrap up this Hunter. Let's wrap up this Hunter Biden thing, because again, I thought yesterday that Hunter Biden pulled a flipperoo, if you will, on the Republican Congress. Apparently, he flipped a flipperoo on his dad. So let's hear this. What's this guy's name? I want to make sure that I get his name that appeared on Laura Ingram's program. I just want to make sure that I get his name correct. It's Saul Weisenberg. Saul Weisenberg. All right, so let's go ahead. Let's roll that video, Gabe, and then I'll break down how Hunter Biden may have he just incriminated his dad. He may have tossed, he and Cringe Jean-Pierre, an obstruction charge onto the president of the United States. Congress is often a theater of the absurd, basically, is what Jonathan Turley writes. He mentions Jamal Brown, representative, pulling the fire alarm before the major vote. He mentions Representative George Santos, whom, by the way, I've spoken to in X Spaces. Very likable guy. Obviously, he did some shoddy things, and so he's paid the consequence for that. And then he also speaks of Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden stood outside Congress and defied a subpoena as being, quote, beyond the absurd. Now he says, what happens next? Well, here's what Turley did. Hunter had two simple choices, he said, to make that particular day. And he chose the one thing that he could not do, and that was to defy Congress. So he says this is simple. He could have appeared and either testified, right? That's obvious, or he could have invoked his right to remain silent. He said the only thing that he could not do is what he did do, and that was just refuse to go into the hearing room. Yet there he was, he writes, Jonathan Turley writes, with counsel Abe Lowell by his side, holding forth a public press conference while refusing to appear in the closed door deposition that was being held behind him. Now, how was this is something that I did not know, and so it was kind of neat to be able to read this and learn this. So Jonathan Turley said the sergeant at arms of the House could have literally yanked yanked Hunter Biden into the Capitol building, and where he would have been, forced to testify or plead the fifth. But the reason he wasn't able to do it, he simply didn't see him, because what Hunter Biden did, check this out. This crackhead thought he had the jump on the House Republicans, and now I'm finding out as well that he simply did not. So what he did was he gave his press conference on the Senate side of the Capitol. If you've ever been to Washington, D.C., the Capitol building is huge. I mean, it is massive. That's why when it comes to some of these J6 videos, sure, I know that there's some people that did some things that are wrong. Were they justified sending people to prison for 22 years, 10 years? I doubt it. I doubt it. But the building is so huge. All right, the compound, if you will, is so huge. It is possible that something is happening on one side. You have no idea, right, what's happening on the other side, except, obviously, if you're security and you have cameras, so on, etc. But Hunter was able to avoid the House Sergeant at Arms pulling him into the hearing room simply by staying on the Senate side of the Capitol as opposed to the House side. Ironically, Jonathan Turley writes that would have been a better option than his blowing a raspberry at the committee and then speeding away. I don't know what he means by that, but obviously that's lingo that many of you might understand. He said, I told you yesterday that the subpoena was not really enforceable. He didn't say this. I'm saying this. I told you yesterday that the subpoena was not really enforceable simply because the House impeachment inquiry, and that's not an impeachment, all right? First off, impeachment doesn't mean that Joe Biden, just to be clear, that he'll be kicked out of the White House. That's just an indictment. That's an indictment. Basically a congressional indictment, all right? It's going to take 60 senators in order to kick Joe Biden out of the White House. That isn't going to happen. However, I do believe that he needs to be impeached. I believe he's one of the worst presidents of the United States, perhaps the most corrupt president ever in the United States. And I think he needs to be held to account. And I think he needs to die with that, quite frankly. And so that's why I want him to be impeached. I want his record tarnished. I understand people are saying, oh, you're just tit for tat because they did it. They did it to Trump. Well, they did impeach Trump, and then we found out that I knew all along, but some of you found out that the allegations were fake, the fake Russia collusion hoax, so on, etc. But in this case, there is mounting evidence that Joe Biden ran a business where his son was essentially the CEO and took orders from daddy and met with people that he could have only gained access to because of his powerful dad, then Vice President of the United States, Joe Biden. But apparently I was wrong when I told you that it was a clever move to give that press conference before the subpoena could be really enforced, because that's wrong. Turley writes, many pundits immediately claimed this was a clever move because the subpoena was not really enforceable until the House voted on the formal impeachment inquiry a few hours later. But according to Jonathan Turley, and who's an attorney, by the way, and a law professor at George Washington University, he's also a Fox News contributor, he says there's no requirement for a formal vote to initiate an impeachment inquiry. Indeed, he says that is precisely what then majority Democrats did with the impeachment of then President Donald Trump. He says, while I encourage the House to hold a formal vote on the inquiry, it is not constitutionally required. All right, so you see Joe Biden stepping in it. He says this is an oversight committee. They do have the independent authority to issue subpoenas. And frankly, I had forgotten about that because that's exactly what made the J6 committee so powerful. All right. They were an oversight committee. The subpoena was issued not only by the oversight committee that he says, but by the Judiciary Committee. It was issued under 3 different authorities, including Rule 12G, of the Oversight Committee, which allows for subpoenas. He says, quote, in the conduct of any investigation or activity or series of investigations or activities within the jurisdiction of the committee. Actually, what I'm quoting is Rule 12G. And again, let me just read that over again. In the conduct of any investigation All right. The Oversight Committee, which allows for subpoenas, quote, in the conduct of any investigation or activities or series of investigations or activities within the jurisdiction of the committee. So Hunter Biden and his legal team, essentially what happened is they committed another serious unforced error. Well, Carl, what was the first unforced error? Remember, the first unforced error was a sweetheart deal. They walked into a courtroom with a judge that wasn't having it, that looked at the deal and said, wait a minute, this deal wouldn't exist for anyone else. I'm not going to sign off on this sweetheart deal where this guy was basically going to get misdemeanors and probation for tax evasion and gun charges. All right. So where the rest of us would have been spending a decade in prison easily, the judge was like, whoa, 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 whoa. And that fell apart. They assumed because Washington, D.C., listen to this, is so corrupt. David Weiss, the prosecutor, and Joe Biden's attorneys assumed that Hunter Biden would be able to get away with this nonsense here. All right, so let me start to wrap this up. We'll end with a video of Saul Weisenberg, Gabe. This is where they screwed up. So this was the second unforced error. And ironically, no one, or at least most, expected Hunter to testify. They didn't expect him to testify in the deposition. Most of the congressmen there actually expected him to plead the fifth. And this is what Turley says. That is what attorney and former IRS official Lois Lerner did. You guys remember her. She went after Tea Party patriots back in the day on behalf of Barack Obama. When House Republicans wanted to ask her about the Obama administration targeting conservative groups, she just pled the fifth. Now, here's what Turley writes, and I disagree with this. He says it was a no-brainer that someone appears to have radically overthought on the Hunter Biden legal team. I don't think that's it. I think you're dealing with a crackhead. I think Hunter Biden flexed on his attorneys because he probably thinks that he's smarter than his attorneys. And Joe Biden probably thinks the same. I mean, these guys are morons, but they've been in Washington, D.C., or Joe Biden has for, a half century, where people have kissed his butt, where he's been able to get away with God knows what. I mean, obviously corruption and becoming a multi-millionaire 10 times over, if you will. But these people have just been able to get away with insanity. Hunter Biden, the same thing. The reason why Hunter Biden gave that press conference is because he's apparently always felt emboldened or entitled because his daddy has power. That's why he gave that press conference. All right. Charlie goes on to say Hunter can now be held in contempt of Congress. He says that'll force the hand of AG Merrick Garland, who aggressively pursued Trump's figures for contempt. That includes Stephen Bannon of the War Room. Despite some of us writing the contrary, Bannon claimed that his lawyers told him he didn't have to appear before the House committee. He was wrong. And as a result, he was swiftly charged and convicted by Garland's prosecutors. Do I think they'll treat Hunter Biden the same way? A few weeks ago, I would have said no. Now I say, I don't know. Because this is political too, and I think the left wants Joe Biden out. Hunter pulled a Steve Bannon in this instance. Turley writes, the contempt case will go to the U.S. Attorney in D.C., Matthew Graves. Now, all of these people are on the left side, and they declined to assist in bringing tax charges against Hunter Biden in the past. He said, yet, Turley writes, by pulling a Bannon, Hunter now faces the expectation in many circles that he will get the full Bannon treatment from Garland. So it's almost like he triggered a legal reaction that must take place by the Attorney General, by the DOJ, because of the stunt that he pulled. I'm so happy to hear this, by the way. And here's what happens. There can also now be a likely obstruction charge that will go against, I hate saying this word, that will go against Joe Biden, the president-elect. He says White House Press Secretary Jean-Pierre, my words, all right, saying that President Biden, quote, was certainly familiar with what his son was going to say. That's what Karine Jean-Pierre said in a press conference yesterday, White House press conference. So if if Joe Biden knew what was going to happen, that means he's obstructing justice. Turley writes, if that is true, it was a breathtaking mistake. One of the four most obvious potential articles of impeachment that he said he laid out in his prior testimony was obstruction. He says there are already questions over special treatment potentially being given to Hunter in the form of alleged felonies being allowed to expire, warnings about planned federal raids, sweetheart deals that I just spoke about. But now he talks about this abuse of power. In addition, he says, President Biden has enlisted White House staff to actively push challenged accounts of his conduct and attack the House of Representatives, House Republicans' investigative process. He says such acts could legally bootstrap prior misconduct into his presidency under abuse of power allegations. All right. Now, I would rather run against Joe Biden in 2024, but I just have this sneaky suspicion they are really trying to gear up for Gavin Newsom because for whatever reason, they believe that he's their best shot to win in 2024. All right. And keep in mind, the left is obviously going after former President Trump. It is likely that he's going to have to start his trial on his involvement, whatever, in jail, however you feel about it, with this Judge Tanya Chutkan on just the day before Super Tuesday. We all know that's intentional. All right. But anyway, this guy needs to be impeached. This guy needs to resign. Actually, he's an existential threat for America at this point. He really is. And they're just so corrupt. They're so compromised. We can't have them. Turley writes that the latest allegation is true. The president was speaking with his son about committing a potentially criminal act of contempt. Hunter was refusing to give testimony focused not on his own role, but on his father's potential role in the alleged influence peddling scheme. That's why he did not want to go and testify. The House can pursue evidence on that conversation and how the president may have supported his son's effort. He says, with his bizarre public display, Hunter has opened a new potential front for prosecution. If the same laws apply to him and the way that it was applied to Bannon, Hunter could find himself indicted within a few weeks. We'll have to wait and see. All right, so here's what Biden said. President Biden himself has maintained that defying subpoenas cannot be tolerated. When subpoenas were issued to Republicans during the House January 6th investigation, Biden declared, and I quote, "I hope that the committee goes after them and holds them accountable criminally." So the GOP, they didn't lose. They didn't lose on this. I thought they did. He says that is precisely, Turley writes, what Republicans will now expect from Garland in Hunter's case. In the meantime, the House did not lose anything that it expected to get from Hunter. It will now move to secure the testimony of a circle of associates surrounding both Hunter and his father. And he says at the same time, the National Archives has finally agreed to give House investigators tens of thousands of emails reportedly involving the president. So Hunter Biden just stepped in it. And so did Joe Biden. They just made things worse for themselves. Thank God they're morons. All right, now, if we have this, let's go ahead and roll. Here's what Saul Weisenberg has to say that confirms what Jonathan Turley wrote about. Let's roll the video, Gabe, and we'll shut it out.
But Saul, Jonathan Turley wrote about the stunt that Hunter pulled yesterday, saying that if Joe Biden did confer with Hunter on defying Congress, it was a breathtaking mistake. Obstruction is a potential articles of impeachment. Saul, do you agree? Now, KJP said, oh, no, the president wouldn't have told him to do that. But they did confirm that Joe Biden knew he was going up there to do what he did.
Well, first of all, Laura, I do agree with Jonathan that would be an article of impeachment for obstruction if Joe in any way encouraged Hunter to take the position that he did. But I think it's an incredible admission to make and a foolish admission to make to even say that he was aware of it. Don't forget this. This is very important. We have to keep reiterating this point. Hunter had no legal authority to do what he did the other day. He is no different legally than Steve Bannon was, and than Peter Navarro was. And let's remember what happened to them. They were held in contempt by the full House. They were referred to the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C. They were prosecuted, and they were convicted. I've heard of no legal excuse for the stunt he pulled yesterday, and the House has to follow through on this. They have to hold him in contempt. They have to refer him to DOJ.
We can end it there. All right. So listen, this guy stepped in it. There's no doubt that he stepped in it. He felt entitled. He felt emboldened. And now he's actually just thrown an additional charge or reason why the president of the United States should be impeached if indeed what he said is true and his father knew about it. And frankly, let's be honest, the guy's corrupt as all get out. Why wouldn't his dad know about it? They've lied about his dad's corruption in his business. They changed the wording, as you heard earlier. CNN, the CNN host talking to Biden's administration official, he added the words that Biden was not financially involved. That's a big shift from he knew nothing about my business. We never talked about his business. All right. Now he's all of a sudden not financially involved. All right. So a bunch of nonsense. Anyway, guys, listen, I appreciate you tuning in. We'll close it out. I appreciate you tuning in to this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. Again, please subscribe wherever you go to get your podcast. Listen, everybody's suffering financially under this administration, but I know a lot of you still want to go out and get some great Christmas presents for your children, for your family members, for your spouse, girlfriend, boyfriend, etc. Go to mypillow.com, click on that radio podcast square, and again, they have deals that are insane right now, from the Giza Dream Sheets to the My Pillow 2.0 to mattress toppers, you name it. Towels, bathrobes, you name it, they're on sale. All you have to do is use my name, mypillow.com, radio podcast square, enter my name, por favor. And also, you're going to be supporting an American business, American manufacturing, all right, and American workers, mypillow.com. I appreciate you guys. Until next time, do not grow weary doing good, and God bless you.